Hello and welcome to another WAB-ART Productions video discussing Bruckner. As before, we start with a painting, so you have a visual piece of art. This is Old Man from Another Time by Sophie Gervais from Canada. Quite an appropriate title, especially when we talk about Bruckner. If you look at the images and photographs, you'll find there are very few of Bruckner, mostly towards the end of his life. Part of the pleasure of creating this channel is along the way I discover a lot of recordings I've never heard before from different conductors. And one of these, only yesterday, I decided to listen again to the 1874 original version of the Fourth Symphony of Bruckner. For those of you that are familiar with Bruckner symphonies and have maybe delved into, out of curiosity, listening to his various symphonies, invariably Symphony number 4 you will hear in what is referred to as its second version of 1878/1880. It's very different from the 1874 version. If you look at comments under many of the videos of different versions, you will find some very strongly held views as to which is the correct version. I take a different view with this, that treat them all equally. Who am I to judge which is better than another? Art, after all, is subjective. Similarly, do I judge a particular artist by looking at their lives, or do I stay neutral and remain subjective to it? What effect and what does it have? How does it impact your life? What a composer may or may not have done during their lifetime, which is often highlighted and used politically. Wagner and Bruckner have both suffered from this. And I've introduced a playlist into the playlist on Wagner's esoteric meaning to the ring cycle. I've included Rudolf Steiner's assessment of Wagner, which I feel is the most accurate one there is. It is also from a perspective of prior to the Third Reich era, so there is none of the hysteria that is often associated with anything to do with that era. It is all, after all, about perspective. So when Rudolf Steiner is talking about Wagner, it is from a perspective of prior to events that happened in the 20th century. We have, shall we say, the luxury of hindsight, and we have this wonderful time in history where there is an inquisitiveness and also a business drive that permits the general public to hear the different versions of each of the symphonies. And it's through looking at this 1874 original in a search on YouTube, I came across a live performance from 2008 by the London Symphony Orchestra under Daniel Harding. If you are familiar with the 1878-1880, this is going to sound very different, but it highlights a question we should ask ourselves. Is it that we have just got used to a particular way of doing things or hearing things in a certain way that we refuse to accept something new? After all, does not music and the nature of music, just like nature itself, continuously change and evolve? For example, take Beethoven's First Symphony and compare it to the Ninth Symphony of Beethoven. Would you say that that is the same composer? Would you say that his musical language is still exactly the same as in the First Symphony as it is in the Ninth Symphony? I would say that no, they go through development. They're inspired by different experiences and encapsulate these in music. So to look at this original, or listen to this original version of the Fourth Symphony, there will be passages and even two of the movements that are very, very different, that brings out completely different tones and colours. And you could say it is Bruckner's original thoughts. Notice in the second and the third and the fourth symphony in their original forms how many breaks you have in the continuity of the music. But as Bruckner says, when I have something important to say, I must take breath first. It must also be remembered that Bruckner was an organist, so his composition is mostly through the improvisation which formed and gave the basis to the many of the themes that exist in the symphony cycle of Bruckner. I need to talk more in another video about the psychology of Bruckner the man and Bruckner the artist, how it is a perfect example of how the external world reflects the internal world inside oneself. I'll come on to that more in another video, but I invite you to listen to this Daniel Harding conducting the London Symphony Orchestra in the 1874 original version of the Fourth Symphony. It's a live performance, and personally I feel it has a energy to it that you don't quite get with a performance in a recording studio. But I would ask that you go into it with an open mind. If you are used to the 1878 and 1880 version of the Fourth Symphony, at least give this a go. It offers new insights into what Bruckner was trying to communicate. That is another topic in itself, something I will come on to. I am at present waiting for some feedback on the technical aspects of the music. I can only express to you what I hear and what I feel from the music. I can't talk about it in terms of the actual musical notes themselves. I am not a musicologist. But I am looking at Bruckner as a whole and going to address all these little issues that are raised about Bruckner and taken in a way that is out of context and often portrayed in a very negative light, when I feel that these can be explained if you look at Bruckner as a whole. But does it help with the music? A lot of these things, the little details about an artist's life, actually detract. But at the same time, if we look at these things subjectively and objectively, without judgment, it reveals a far bigger picture. The same with this channel. This is not just about Bruckner. This is just not about symphonies. This is far more than even art itself. We will come on to that in future videos. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I hope you have had some pleasure at looking at this painting. Love to you all.